Poverty Through Freedoms: How Capabilities Define the Threshold by Brad Stephenson and Savannah Johnson. Before we discuss how to define poverty and what we think the measurements should be, we decided to ask fellow peers how they themselves would define poverty. It soon became evident that there were common misconceptions or simplistic views as to what poverty is. Some people said it was the inability to provide the necessities. Others said a severe lack of income. All of these are certainly aspects of poverty. It is much more complex than that. In reality, poverty is a combination of inadequate income and a lack of capabilities that result in a low quality of life. This low quality of life, or poverty, can attempt to be measured by the functionings a person has. So what does this mean? John Iceland defines poverty as economic or income deprivation. This is where inadequate income comes into play. This is significant, but what we have to also understand is this: inadequate income, or not having enough money, is not the sole source of poverty. Nobody wants money. They want what money can buy, the opportunities it can provide. This leads us to the second idea, that poverty relates to a lack of capabilities. But what are these so-called capabilities? In his paper, Capability and Well-Being, Sen describes capabilities as the alternative combinations of functionings a person can achieve, where functionings are the beings and doings achieved by a person. Poverty is not a matter of low well-being, but of the inability to pursue well-being because of the lack of economic means, which is essentially the result of having a lack of capabilities. The key in understanding the relationship between income and capabilities is that the inadequacy of income is not a matter of having an income level below an externally fixed poverty line, but it is having an income below what is adequate for generating the specified levels of capabilities. The tricky thing about the two, however, is that it can create this continuous cycle where a person could be lacking in income, which results in a lack of capabilities, or even vice versa, where a lack of capabilities could result in the inability to receive a sufficient income. This is why both are important factors when addressing poverty. The third aspect of poverty, and probably most important to truly understanding what it is realizing that poverty cannot be easily defined as simply a lack of material things. This is implicitly stated in Robert Rector's paper on what poverty is in the United States today, when he lists off the items a typically poor family has. He repeatedly states throughout his paper that a typical poor house has air conditioning, 2 TVs, and a car, among other things. Some might argue that this is him stating poverty is insignificant in America, but this is not actually true. What people fail to realize is that this is his way of displaying that poverty is not something that can be easily defined as a lack of materialistic things. He even provides a section titled "Confusing Poverty and Deprivation." Yes, there are some circumstances where a person or family is deprived of virtually all the essential needs, like shelter, clothes, and food, but Rector realizes poverty is more than that. There are struggles and hardships separate from deprivation that those experiencing poverty endure. One also has to take into account that some people who are in poverty have not always been in poverty. They could have bought those TVs before they lost their job, but either way, buying a TV is just a one-time expenditure. Poverty includes the struggle to provide for well-being, not just the inability to have well-being. From this, we know that something other than money and material resources matter. So what is it? The answer can be found in the writings of a philosopher named Martha Nussbaum, who created a list of 10 capabilities which she defines as central to an individual's well-being and dignity. Since we know poverty is a combination of things, we are concerned most with Nussbaum's central capabilities of life, bodily health, senses, imagination, and thought. These are the capabilities that will help us understand how to measure poverty. This is not to say these are the only important capabilities. It just implies that having these central capabilities will give a person a good foundation and the ability to have others. Before we talk about these central capabilities, though, we need to address the differences in capabilities and functionings. Sen states that the primary concern in poverty analysis is with capability to function rather than with achieved functionings. This is because if we were to use functionings to describe the state of poverty a person is in, it would limit that person and force them to live in a certain way based on what the government or others thinks is best. And what they think is best might not be best for everyone. But when one uses the capabilities approach, it provides options for that person to choose from. It provides freedom. Freedom has intrinsic importance for the person's well-being achievement, resulting in a better quality of life. So part of our definition for poverty is a lack of capabilities as opposed to lack of functionings. Note, however, that the only way we can measure these capabilities is by measuring the functionings a person has. So let's take a look at the central capabilities we think are critical for an individual's well-being that can be measured by means of functionings. The first is the central capability of life. If we see a significant drop in life expectancy for a certain group of people, we can learn that they may not have the capability to survive. This leads to the central capability of bodily health. Providing a threshold for bodily health is crucial for survival so that a person can be adequately nourished and have shelter. This is a capability that has many functionings which are most commonly measured already. The capability of senses, imagination, and thought is important so that one can see things in a truly human way, not hindered by a lack of education. This could be measured by the functionings of an education a person has. If a certain area has a higher number of high school dropouts, we can tell they may not have the capability to receive an education. This might be because they have to leave school to work, take care of younger kids in a household, or some other matter. Now that we have sufficiently defined poverty and how we should measure it, we need to address the means by which it can physically be measured. Currently, the U.S. uses a method known as the Official Poverty Measure, or OPM. This method only accounts for income as the main resource and uses an outdated system for the threshold by defining it as 3 times the cost of food on the basis that food takes up a third of spending money. Basing the OPM strictly on income does not provide an accurate assessment because it does not take into account expenses like transportation costs for getting to work, taxes, and childcare. OPM does, however, account for composition of family by including the number of members and age of each person, which can be significant for assessing their economic situation. For example, taking care of a toddler will cost significantly less than providing for a teenager. There is another method known as the Supplemental Poverty Measure, or SPM, which includes income, in-kind benefits, and near cash as resources. For the threshold, the SPM does well in accounting for variance in the geography of housing and by including all members that are in a house as opposed to a lawful family.
So for us, the first factor we'll use as a resource to measure poverty is the household income. We will also include in-kind benefits and near-cash resources to accurately see how each family is doing. The concern with using in-kind benefits as a resource is that a family might not qualify for them anymore if they are above the poverty line. So in order to prevent a cycle of people switching from being either under the poverty line or over it, they have to have a certain amount of security and ability to stay above the poverty threshold before they stop receiving in-kind benefits. We will also use functionings to help measure the access to capabilities a family has by incorporating things like education, transportation, and housing as resources. The threshold will take into account family composition like the OPM and geographical living differences like the SPM. The threshold will also be measured by 1.2 times the income that is required to achieve a sustainable quality of life for the area based on factors listed above, to ensure not only needs are met, but also capabilities to provide for a better quality of life. We have made it clear the differences between functionings and capabilities in the definition, but the best way to attempt to measure these capabilities is by measuring the functionings a person has. Otherwise, it would be impossible and just a guessing game that might do more harm than good. If we see that a group of people fail to have certain functionings, we can take a closer look at the problem to see if they don't have the capabilities to achieve them. This is how we can strive to accurately define and measure poverty so that we can strive to provide freedom for a life of well-being for everyone.